So today I'm going to demonstrate on how to break down a half rack of lamb. So two of these would be a hotel rack, which would be your primal. So this is considered a subprimal as far as the rack of lamb. If you notice on mine, yours probably too, it does have, in my case, the yield grade on here. So it does have the shield stamp with the USDA choice that's on this. Okay. So two sides to the rack. The side that I have closest to you right now is the shoulder side. So that would be the side closer to the primal shoulder. And then the other side is the loin side, so side close to the loin. If you'll notice on the loin side, you got that solid eye as far as the meat is concerned, where on this side, it looks like you got more of this fat. You've got an overlap of meat happening. Plus, you actually have part of the shoulder blade right up here in the upper part of the cap. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to break this down and turn this into what they call a Frenched rack of lamb. All right, so I'm going to look on the underside, and I want to see where the cuts are at. If you'll notice, and again, depending on your cut, you may or may not have these, but you're going to have the end part to where the rib bones are at. You should have the backbone removed. You might a few times have some of these, what they call feather bones in here, that will need to be separated out and removed. And that's a pretty easy process. What you're going to do is you're going to take your boning knife and you're just going to work right up underneath of the bone. I'll have to do a little separation here, like so. Okay. You get up underneath this bone. And again, depending on how far they go with the bandsaw when they're doing these initial cuts, you might not have to worry about these at all. But some of you may have the feather bone on there, some of you may not. Okay? And this goes down right into the fat. So I'm going to cut right into this fat to separate it out. All right? So got the feather bones taken care of. That's part of your waist. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. You would do it with the meat towards you, bones away from you, but I'm going to show it the opposite so you can see what happens. What I'm doing with my hands is I'm looking for the natural seam or separation of fat in this fat cap. And you can see how I'm able to just manually separate this out, okay? That's what you want to do, is you want to separate this fat cap, because literally you can see this is just a wall of fat, all right? So, people don't necessarily want to eat a big wall of fat. They don't mind some fat on, but they don't want it all on. So you can see I'm just taking and I'm doing the separation like so, okay? Now, once I've done this separation, what I'm going to do is then make a cut. So you should find that you are at the point where you're above where the eye is at. So you take your boning knife and you cut above the eye. Okay? Make a cut above the eye. You go to the other side. You cut above the eye here. See how I'm cutting above the eye in both instances? So make sure that that cut, like a pinky width difference, from where the eye is to where you do your cut is a good rule of thumb, pinky. Make that mark and then connect the dots. Take the one cut from one side and cut it all the way across. And you're going to cut all the way down, because what you're going to do is you're going to hit the bones. Okay? In fact, you should hear like a xylophone. Okay? Did you hear that? That xylophone effect, I'm going across the bones with the tip of my blade. Now what I can do is remove the rest of this cap. So I just cut with the tip of my blade, just very lightly, until I can separate it. Okay? So I've separated that first part of the cap. And that goes over for waste. Now I got to remove the rest of the cap. And so again, what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to use the tip of my blade and I'm going to follow the bones. Right. Once I do this initial, I usually start closer to me and I just pull back and I take the tip of my blade and I just follow the bone structure. So I'm working my way down. With my left hand here, I'm pulling back the fat cap so I can see where the knife is going. And I'm always pushing down against the bones here because I want to get as much of the fat and stuff off of the bone structure. Okay? So now I've removed the rest of that cap. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of meat in here. You can see there's a natural seam. You can pull a little bit of meat, and you know, if you're bored, you're glutton for punishment or something like that, or maybe you have an intern that you want to keep them busy, you could actually have them come in and separate out this meat, and then that meat you could use for sausage making or something like that. You don't have to do that for your demonstration for me, okay? I'm just showing you that, yes, there is some in here, and if you're trying to get as close to 100% as possible, you could do that, but you have to weigh out, is that much meat going to make a difference if I'm paying somebody so much an hour to get taken care of? So food for thought for you. For us, though, once you get that cap off, this goes over with the scraps. All right. So now I've got my rack of lamb here. You'll sometimes see some chefs will actually leave one layer of fat on. If you like the extra fat, that's fine. But I think a lot of people, especially with this being a more delicate dish out of the lamb, they like to have, you know, it kind of trimmed down a little bit more. Okay. So I'm going to finish up the rack here. I'm going to do a little bit more cleaning. So I've got some fat here. Again, you can determine whether or not you want to leave this on or not. I want you to leave this on because this gives you a better product. If I start trimming stuff away, I'm going to lose more of the finished product, and so you're going to have less rack of lamb for people. But this looks really, really nice. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to trim up the bones. So I'm going to just use the tip of my blade. And you can see I got this big piece of fat here. So just the tip of the blade. You don't want to cut into the rack, but you want to remove this big piece of fat from it because it's not necessarily as appealing. Again, like I've been doing, I'm pushing up against the bones to get those bad boys cleaned off. Okay. All right, now I'm going to clean up the bones themselves. So we've got the bone, and then we've got like this meat in between it. So if you think about it, if you're thinking about this like pork, this piece right here would be part of your baby back ribs, right? Because you got the loin here and you got the ribs coming off, so this would be part of your baby back ribs. Well, I want to separate these into individual pieces. So here's what I do. I take, so this is the way I do it with meat towards me, but I'm going to do it backwards so you all can see how this works. So what I do is I look to see where the piece of meat is. I take my blade and I go up against the bone to remove that meat that's in between. Okay. Then what I do is I go by the next bone. I go down, pushing towards the bone. And this is why I want to do this towards, you want to do it towards yourself so you don't cut into the loin. Once I get down, I turn the blade, I do a cut, and then I cut up the other side, pushing against the bone on the other way. And so each one of these I'm going through. Don't want to cut into the rack, the actual loin, and I'm cutting and separating these pieces here. And again, push against, go down, make sure you're pushing against the bone, turn it, push against the bone the other way. You can see how that does a nice separation. And this meat in between is great for grinding. I always add this to my grinding scraps when I'm looking to do like different lamb sausages or lamb meatballs or something along those lines. Again, I'm trying to look for as close to 100% utilization as possible. Yes, this is all considered waste for our standpoint, and so we'll have to weigh it out as such, but it is still usable. It's not garbage waste. It's waste, but product that's able to be used for other things. I'm going to turn this way so I can do this last bone. Go up the side, get those cleaned up. All right. So again, all of this is waste. Goes over with my waste pile. So I've got them trimmed up. Now I've got to do some finishing trimming. So I've got some more fat and stuff on here I want to trim up. So you're going to use your knife. And again, just be careful. Don't have your hands in the way, but trim up this extra fat. Give yourself a nicer looking finished product. The other thing you can see, sometimes chefs will go in and they'll scrape the bones, and that's fine. The more food and meat and bone and fat you get off of here, the cleaner these will look once they get roasted. So you'll see chefs that will go in, scrape. It's one that's not my favorite, only because then it starts to dull my knife, so I have to take it to the stone more often. But the more you can get off of here as far as food and fat, the nicer looking your finished product will be. Right? Once you've gotten this done, then you're ready to move on to the cooking process. This pretty much, in essence, finishes up what you need. And so you've got a basic French rack of lamb. Okay. Typically a serving size with this would be half a rack is usually a nice size. So you're looking at 4 bones because you got 8 here. What I would do when I separate this, I'm not going to separate it here. In yours, I would roast the whole thing and then you can cut it. But I would separate 4 and 4. Well, if you notice, this side's a little bit bigger, a little bit wider than this side. So when I do my cut, I wouldn't cut in the middle. I'd cut closer to this bone. So there's less by length here, but since it's bigger, you're getting is a little bit more evenly. Okay? So that is how you would French a rack of lamb.